very warm welcome to everyone who has joined us today. I hope you and your families are in good health. My name is Sujit and I will be your host for today's webinar. Along with me, we also have Isha from our team to moderate the chat. Today, we have gathered on this virtual platform for the second session from an interesting webinar series, HRTech Integration Masterclass by Harbinger Systems. In our first session, we discussed how seamless integration of learning management systems, learning experience platform, and other HR tools can be achieved. Today, we'll be taking our discussion to next level, wherein we'll be focusing on how to gain key insights from data distributed across multiple HR systems. We will talk about overcoming the challenges that one may encounter in making HR data ready for analytics. Now, it's time to introduce our speakers for the event. The session will be delivered by two of our integration experts from Harbinger, Prachi Kulkarni and Maheshkumar Kharade. Mahesh, as few of you may know from the first session, possesses extensive core technology expertise in integrations, and Prachi is a product evangelist with wide experience in e-learning, HRTech, and healthcare domains. With that, let me hand it over to Mahesh. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Sujit. Good morning and good evening, everyone. As today's session is about getting insights from data, I plan to approach it using three different aspects. Number one is data. Number two is integration approach to aggregate the data. And number three is analytics. So let's start with the data. During our multiple conversations on data aspect with our HRTech customers, we have observed a couple of pain points. First one is that every product company is collecting a lot of data, but for obvious reasons, they are not able to utilize this data. Second point we have observed is some of our customers offer really good analytical capabilities, which even their end users find really useful. But as every organization uses more than 2 or 3 different HR applications, they expect our customers' product to also provide analytics by combining data from other HR applications as well. When we look beyond these conversations, we can easily spot some industry trends leading to this particular aspect. Let's take an example of Workday. Many of us will agree that Workday offers excellent analytics feature. How come they achieve this, right? Short answer is Workday offers a highly integrated platform which has access to all kinds of HR data. On top of this, they also provide abilities to easily integrate with external data sources. To sum it up, though not every platform need to sort of match with how Workday have handled this, but at least we need to find ways to make most of the data that we're collecting. We have helped our customers achieve this very successfully, and we'll discuss this shortly as we go through this session. Before that, let's take a quick pause and check how our audience think about these pain points. So time for a quick poll. Sujit, can we launch the poll, please?
Sure, Mahesh. Here we go.
So the question is, what problems are you facing in implementing the sort of robust analytics for data you collect? So it could be because you're not able to utilize that data. It may start with just an integration where you need to first aggregate it. Or you already have it in place, but you need to provide some in-depth analytics on top of that.
So we have started receiving the votes. It's almost 60%. let's wait for 10 more seconds and then maybe we can close the poll. Yeah, last 5 seconds. Let me close the poll now.
So now if we look at these results, we can see that it's like almost split between 2 points, right? Where either we are not able to utilize the data, or first thing is that you want to integrate all the data sources that you have. So you can think about utilizing it in a better way by providing integrated analytics or even go beyond that. So I think that's what our today's discussion point is as well, where we are thinking about or talking about how do you sort of connect all these different data sources together. Before we do that, I just want to quickly touch upon different HR data elements that we often see. So this HR data we can categorize primarily into 3 levels or types. So first one is the HRIS data, where we are talking about data that is collected by our day-to-day applications that we use for different HR needs, like recruitment, performance management, learning management, succession planning, benefits, talent development, and so on. Other HR data, which sort of not the systems or the platforms that our users use on daily basis, but they do use them. So like employee engagement platforms, some of the travel related platforms, mentoring, absence management, and so on. And some of the business data, which sort of need to sort of correlate with all other data that we have looked at. So as we are talking about the correlation, let's look at that through an example. Say based on your product offering, it will definitely have access to the HRIS data. For example, if your product offers ATS, that is applicant tracking capabilities, it will have recruitment data for sure. Some additional data elements it may have is about jobs and demographics. Now, based on demand, you may want to go beyond typical metrics that are used to measure efficiencies of recruitment process. Let's say application now should offer some correlation between time taken to fill a position and performance of the candidate over 6 months from the date of joining. Now, in this case, ATS application need to access data from performance management application as well. You may have a further complicated use case, and based on that, you may need to even look at some of the other HR data sources or even some of the business data sources. In short, apart from data collected in your HR application, it needs to connect with several other HR applications to get the data that is required to provide that real insight. So is it really possible? Absolutely, it is very much possible. Most of HR applications expose this data either by means of API or some other mechanism. Again, it is possible, but it's not as simple as it may look like. There are some challenges one may face while getting this data from other sources. So based on our experience, let me share some of those as we move into this session further. So the first part of the challenge is due to the nature of the data, which is the distributed nature of the data. As data is spread across multiple applications, when we start aggregating it, we find a lot of redundancy. Second most common issue is every application have their own schema definitions. Even some of the applications started using NoSQL databases, which sort of further complicates it, because now you have to work with increased number of sources as well as the variation in terms of how the data is stored. Lastly, as there are so many HR applications that are available in the market, it even further creates so many number of combinations to handle. Apart from this, there are some other factors we have also observed. I have tried to bucket them into 2 different scenarios. Let's start with the first one. sometimes the problem is not even due to the external or internal data sources or need for an in-depth analytics. It's about internal sources only. This may happen primarily in case like you happen to have some part of the legacy platform coexisting with your newly developed modules. Other reason could be you have acquired some product which sort of integrates very well at the user interface layer, but there is no tighter integration at the data layer. The second scenario is, I would say this is an extension to the first scenario, only the addition is the external sources. So apart from handling the internal data sources which are separated, you are also looking at the external sources now. Because of that, we need to now also consider the challenges with respect to different integration methods, data sync frequencies, and so on. With this, I think we have discussed enough about why it is difficult. Now, let me request Prachi to sort of show us how we have addressed some of these challenges when we worked for many of our customers and delivered that highly desired analytical capabilities to our end users. Over to you, Prachi.
Thanks, Mahesh. So I'll be talking about a case study where we helped the customer have a data warehousing solution. The customer in question was a relocation company. But before I go into the details, let's hear from the customer himself about what he has to say.
Hi, this is Steven Chen. Thank you for having me today. You're getting my best COVID-19 look in this short video. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. I'm the Senior VP of Technology and Security for New Compass Mobility. We are a leading RMC, relocation management company, which helps small and medium business, as well as Fortune 500 companies move employees domestically and globally. We have data from many stakeholders, including employees being moved, the clients, as well as suppliers across many industries, such as hospitality, travel, and logistics. We need a rich and robust solution meeting our clients' demand for custom reporting with data analytical and visualization capabilities. We reached out to Harbinger. Harbinger team came in and started a thorough data architecture review. Together, we defined a new data strategy. This has led to the implementation of a business intelligence solution with data warehouse backend on Azure Tech Stack. Key highlights of the solution include robust integration approach to aggregate data from multiple data sources, data migration ETL workflows to synchronize all the data, seamless integration of Power BI into New Compass's internal and external platforms. Our initial release of the software will be Q3 this year. We're excited to know the expected benefits include notable performance improvements. Complex report can be generated in a matter of seconds. Clients can have custom reports in tabular or graphical formats. Dashboards that can be drilled into for advanced analytics. We appreciate our partnership with Harbinger to date and are looking forward to further teaming to build more capabilities for our clients.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen, for the informative video. And now let's get into the details of the case study. So if I look at the existing platform, as Stephen said, there were multiple stakeholders for the platform. There were the suppliers, and there were the customers and their employees, and there was the hospitality industry. What essentially it boiled down to was the multiple stakeholders had specific platforms, and some of the platforms were using legacy technology. In fact, there was tighter integration. There were third-party platforms in picture, and they were also integrated with the relocation company platform. As a result, there were multiple data sources and data formats, and some of the data was coming through APIs, some of it was coming through the scheduled jobs, and at times, there was even Excel import of the data. There were processes in the platform which were manual, and all of this, the various data formats, the data sources, and the manual processes, they added to the overhead of data exchange. If I want to go in details of the pain point with respect to our solutioning, Because of the multiple stakeholder platforms and the platform being developed over a period of time, the data architecture essentially was also developed over a period of time, and it had an increasingly complex schema and a lot of redundancy in it. The second challenge was this architecture also proved a little difficult if I want to gather more data. I mean, even the client could figure out a lot of points where the data could be gathered, but the architecture was a limitation. The manual process was obviously time consuming and error prone. And yes, there were some reports generated in the current platform, but they were very limited and with very limited customization. As a result, for the relocation company, the existing application provided a threshold as to how many large clients they could handle simultaneously. So when we started working with them, what we came up was we needed a rehaul of the entire platform on multiple levels. We needed to look at the data architecture, the strategy, and then go to the analytics. So when we started working, this is how we got to about it. The distributed data came in multiple formats. It was the transactional data, the policies and process data, and access rules and usage data. And remember, all this data was coming from different sources, even though it was like of these types. We decided to put that in data warehousing, but before we do that, we needed to prepare the data. So say, for example, the data had different formats. Maybe the same information was saved in different formats. The date had different formats, that kind of a thing. There was redundancy. So we prepared the data and we put it in the data warehouse based on Azure, as Steven said. Now, when we put the data in warehouse, this was initially the entire data, one-time migration was there done, where we got the prepared data in the data warehouse, but it didn't end there. We also had the real-time migration set up, and then the entire ETL transformation was obviously done on the data, so that we were ready now for analytics. So for analytics, we did an integration with Power BI. Power BI provided us with a lot of nicer graphical interfaces along with the tabular reports and other means to analyze the data. And then we also needed to have these capabilities existing with the current web application. So there was a SSO-based integration done with the web application. It also provided easy access to all other stakeholders and then access control for the relocation company for the analytics reports. And then the API layer, which was there for the clients for use, was for that. But this was not done in silo. So what the entire process was not done in silo. So what we did was we did some workflow automation, which kind of provided us a central place where different parts could be plugged in and played. This also provided us a way to kind of remove the manual processes. And anytime a platform is upgraded or overhauled, that could be just plugged in the central workflow. And the entire business operation could continue throughout all this. Now, I would like to request Mahesh to go into more details as to how exactly we got the data into the data warehouse and did further analytics. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Prachi. I think that was a really insightful walkthrough. I think during the walkthrough, Prachi focused on different steps that team followed to aggregate the data and then using it for analytics. I tried to get the similar process on the screen, and I'm trying to now expand it at the broader scale. Because if we look at the scenario that Prachi mentioned, she talked about probably the scenario 1, where we had to deal with only internal sources. Now let's take a deep dive into these steps end to end with respect to both the scenarios. So the first step is all about the data sources. And then comes the approach to integrate and aggregate them. Once we have access to all the data, it's processed by the ETL jobs. That's where the extract is to get data from respective sources. Then it needs to be transformed into the common formats or the types. That's where the transform layer would come into the picture, and then load it into the common store. Now in the case study that Prachi explained, it was data warehouse, which is used as a common data store. But based on the business need, it could even be a data lake, or it could be as simple as common database. So it's like really flexible. I mean, you can choose the way you want to put it. This makes your data ready to be used for analytics or even for AI or even machine learning. So that's how the complete process looks like. But if you have to map the time that is required for each of these steps with respect to the implementation time frame, we find that most of the time that we spend is on the first three steps, which is about integrating it, aggregating it, and then processing it. And in the context of today's webinar, let's expand on the integration and aggregation aspect of it. As we discussed in the beginning, there are several data sources one need to deal with. In the use case we talked, it was primarily about the internal data sources. Now we are looking at the external sources where we'll get data either through the APIs or even sometimes through the files. That is why it's important to design your integration layer with a precision. At high level, in the next box, you can see there are three different approaches we can choose from. Now, based on the scenario, if your need is to, let's say, add data from external applications incrementally, you can go for P2P, that is point-to-point connector approach. Next approach is making use of integration framework. Now, this type of framework can help you create a connector simply through a configuration. This is very useful approach if you see end users using variety of HR applications and you need to integrate with most of them at very rapid speed. The last approach is based on ESB, that is Enterprise Service Bus Architecture. Now, this approach is best suited when you have multiple internal sources of data. Let's say you have your own application that has multiple APIs which needs to be used for data aggregation. Then you also have more than one application that contributes to the overall data aggregation process. And then there are these numerous external HR applications that you need to connect, which are used by your end users. So that's when you go for the ESB based approach. Now, selection of these approaches is one of the favorite discussion topic for me. So I can just go on and keep sort of evaluating it. But in the interest of time, let's not do that. We can always connect offline and discuss this in detail with respect to your business requirements. Just feel free to reach me or my team and we can get on the call and take this discussion forward. But the bottom line is we have multiple approaches to choose from based on the scenario that you are dealing with, and we can very well help you with that. Now with this, it brings me to the last slide of my today's presentation. So I'll do a quick recap as a part of this, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So today we discussed that analytics is becoming really important part of any HR application. We also discussed about how application developers need to sort of look for all kinds of data from different HR applications to provide the in-depth analytics. All this is required because now focus is shifting from measuring efficiency to finding effectiveness and outcome-based analytics. To enable this transition, data is the most critical element, but it's distributed. So the integration is medium, which will help to create the data and then rest can follow. I think we have covered all the points that we discussed today. So with this, I'll take it to the questions segment. And as my team is checking for those questions, let me make an announcement about the next session real quick. The next webinar from our series on HRTech Integration Masterclass is planned on 17th of June at 10 a.m. Pacific. If you check your chat window, you will find a link to register. Please register to join us to discuss how to automate candidate workflows during recruitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh. And here we have our first question. Can you tell us more about how you typically handle variation in schemas across different applications?
That's an interesting question because I think it's one of the challenge as we discussed in the beginning, right? Now, the variation in the schema is primarily because every HR application have decided to define their own data structure and even the APIs to get that data in their own way. Now, we approach this in a couple of ways. One is that we have good extensive experience working with the standard compliant schemas that are offered by someone like HR Open. So we try to map all the data that we get from these different platforms through this standardized schema. So it makes it really easy to cover all the elements that may come or may not come from these different platforms. So that is the most common approach that we follow. In some other cases, we can sort of define a customer specific schema and then sort of uniform all the data that we get across the sources. So these are the two approaches that we use based on the need by looking at the complexity of the data we are receiving, the number of platforms we are working with, and then we sort of work with respect to the variation that we get into the schemas.
Thanks, Mahesh. The next question we have is, what is your recommendation for integration of acquired modules or products? In other words, are you saying UI level integration is not enough?
So I think my point there was the UI level integration is enough when it comes to provide seamless access between different modules that you are trying to integrate. So for example, like some of the HRIS companies sort of acquired, let's say, an LMS platform. Now, when it comes to the end users, along with the HR workflows, they want to use the learning module and it is integrated at the UI layer and you're good enough. But what if now you need to access data both from a learning module as well as your performance module and the core HR to create some meaningful insights through the analytics. Now that's where your UI level integration is not enough. And that's where I talked about a tighter integration at the data layer, where you want to integrate the data. Now, what happens in these cases is you have now 3 different databases at the back end, and sort of combining them and making sure application uses them becomes even more complicated and time consuming process, which is not even realistic. So we take out the problem to the analytics level, where we say that you combine that data, which is only required for analytics. And that's where comes the strategy of developing your data warehouse around the data that you need only for analytics, bring it from different data sources, integrate them, and make it ready for the analytics. So you get that tighter integration even at the data layer.
Yeah. Next question is, what is difference between one-time migration and real-time migration?
Prachi, you want to take that because I think it relates to the case study that you told us about.
Yes. So, Mahesh, if I want to talk about a little details of what we did there, the one-time migration, as I explained, was done during the formation of the data warehouse, at the beginning of formation of the data warehouse, where we got data from those different sources in the data warehouse. And then the real-time migration is where any time the data sources get updated with the data, it needs to reflect into the warehouse. So there are like triggers and there are scripts and there are jobs which are run at a specified frequency where all that data is gathered, and then again it goes through the preparation process where all those aspects that I talked about are done over that data, and then the data is reflected in the data warehouse. And it is such that it is not exactly real time, but it is a real time, pretty much near real time migration of the data in the warehouse. I think that answers the question.
Thanks, Prachi.
Yes. Our next question is, which integration approach is most flexible and scalable?
Now, I would say that's a tricky one to answer because we talked about 3 approaches, point-to-point, the framework-based, and the ESB-based. Now, in terms of the scalability, my vote goes for ESB because that's the most scalable one. Now, flexibility, I would say it really varies based on the scenario because, as I said, like if you need to add data incrementally, then the flexibility is in terms of sort of adding those integrations as you go along, as you bring that data, as you talk to more and more customers. So you want to go for P2P. And similarly, the criteria changes, and sometimes you might find the framework-based approach more flexible versus ESB-based approach. And as I said, I mean, that's like an interesting topic because the selection criteria is something you have to evaluate and then decide which one suits the best your needs. So as I said, I think we can see the contact information on the screen as well. Reach out to us in case you have a specific need, and I think we should get into a more detailed discussion to figure out which strategy suits you best.
Great. Our next question is, are you saying to provide better analytics, we have to follow all the steps you showed us today?
Need not be, but what I'm saying is, like, when you look at the analytics, you can look at it in the context of just an analytics that is there for your application and in-depth analytics. Now, if you need in-depth analytics capabilities, yes, you need to follow the steps. But if you're looking for only adding an analytical layer into your existing application, then probably you are good with whatever data sources you have in the current way they are placed, and you can just create an analytics layer on top of it.
Okay. Thanks, Mahesh. I think that was our last question. We might not be able to answer more questions live in the interest of time, but we'll be keeping the chat open for some more time, and we'll answer them via email. So thanks to all our participants for taking the time out for today's webinar. We hope it was an insightful session and you have a lot of takeaways. We will arrange for the webinar recording to be sent across to you. And in case you have any follow-up questions, please do drop us a line at hsinfo@harbingergroup.com. And we would be more than happy to answer them for you. Wish you all the best of health. Stay safe.